Hello and welcome to the video. Today I'm going to be doing something pretty unprecedented. I'm going to give you not one, not two, but all three of my team's decks for the Calling Madrid. And I'm going to go over every single hero in Blitz so you know what to play and more importantly what not to. Let's get into it. Alright, let's go top to bottom, A to Z, every single hero. Azalea, don't fucking do it. Benji, don't fucking do it. Bolton, don't fucking do it. Bravo, bruh. To speak a little more, I'll give you some clarification on the bruh. Bravo is, I think, a slightly less efficient version of Oldhim in the Blitz format. Your equipment is slightly worse, and I think it's actually relatively easy for the defense reaction version of Oldhim to fatigue you. And it doesn't do what Oldhim does best well, which is block. It doesn't do that as well as Oldhim, so you're struggling. Dash, bruh. Like, really, there's a lot of content creators out there saying that Dash is one of the best decks, or that, you know, Dash is a potential deck in Blitz. But really, I think you end up playing a ton of bad cards, presenting reasonable numbers but with no back-end effects, while also not having the best numbers. And if your numbers aren't bigger than your opponents, while you also don't present any on-hits or anything particularly unfair, and your armor doesn't have much block, then there's no real big upside for playing that. And Dash just doesn't have that. Sure, Teklo Pounder and Talishar are good, but that strategy doesn't work into Oldhim. They just fatigue you. And I've even beaten games where turn 0 they play the second Teklo Pounder. They start the game basically with 2 Teklo Pounders in play, and I've beaten them. And I've beaten them playing maximum velocities. You know, those are the things where, like, when they do those things, when they do the big setup payoffs, right, they should still be winning. And they're not. This deck is just slightly behind the pale, not that impressive. Chain, put into potential playables. Dawnblade, I do believe is actually a potential playable. I think that, unfortunately, the big problem of Dorinthia is that it struggles into Oldhim, which you're going to find as a problem with a lot of the decks in this list. They seem to struggle into Oldhim, and because of that, they get somewhat invalidated. Ira's going into the bruh tier. Ira would be decent, again, if it wasn't for Oldhim, but Oldhim has such a clean time with dealing with Ira's abilities and dealing with the Kodachi and the Mask of Momentum triggers that Ira basically has to rely on 2 turns throughout the game where he's going to be able to stack 4 blues and exude confidence for 12. And hope to God that Ira doesn't have, that Oldhim doesn't have like a couple of 3 blocks in hand to block 6. You know, they're looking to push 8 damage per each of those turns, and then somewhere throughout the rest of the game find 4 damage or find 10 damage with the Sigil of Solaces as you go through. So you know, it's just, you're probably going to get fatigued into Oldhim playing Ira. You probably don't have a great way to go around it. If you could find a way to address that problem, it probably finds its way into the potentially playable, but it's likely behind all of the other mid-range decks, and it's likely behind Kasai as well, because it loses to the Rune Blades. It doesn't have the same output as the Rune Blades, probably. It doesn't have as good armor as the Rune Blades. It doesn't have as good armor as the Warriors. Let's go into Kano. Okay, so Kano, this is the one deck in the format I would say I don't really have a good grasp on. Kano remains somewhat out of my grasp in terms of understanding. I think right now it's definitely playable. How playable comes down to, as is probably going to be the case for most of the heroes in this format, the Kano Oldhim matchup. I think Kano Oldhim, it depends who you ask. I've seen very good Kano players get fatigued by Oldhims, where they just didn't have any reds left in their deck and they died. And then when I speak to top Kano players, I hear them say, oh no, it's an unlosable matchup for good Kanos. But it's like, I've seen people who are, you know, calling winners losing on Kano, and they're experienced players, and, you know, saying nothing to the quality of the players. You know, if you're seeing that, then it says that the, you know, the matchup's definitely not necessarily free for Kano. So that's in a matchup that at this point in time I don't have enough understanding on. But at the very least, the fact that it's up for debate, I do think that Kano is solid into a lot of the other decks in the format. And thus, I think Kano is definitely a potential option for the team. Kasai, I really like Kasai. I think that Kasai actually now has a good Oldhim matchup. It used to not have a good Oldhim matchup, but I think with a couple of changes and ways that you're able to pivot your game plan, you're actually able to have a pretty insane inevitability against Fatigue Oldhim, and into a more mid-range Oldhim, you end up just having a really insane time, because Winter's Wail for 4 doesn't look very threatening when you can just block it with your boots and one card. So if they're block 3 Winter's Wailing, that's really good for you. If they're block 4 or block 5 every single turn, you get to farm them with Minerva, and you actually have more go-agains than they have defense reactions, and you end up running them out of cards eventually. You will probably, if you play it correctly, you will actually be able to deck the Oldhim. So Kasai into the rest of the field is also worth debating. I think Kasai struggles a little bit into the Runeblades, slightly behind into the Runeblades, but not massively. I think probably actually pretty 50-50 into Briar, but then probably slightly behind into Chain, because when you're playing that 3-4 turn game, Chain actually starts to get a bit of value from its shackles, and the value of Husk will really start to shine against a hero like Kasai, where you play a Blade Runner and then your damage is up front, and they just get to cover your second attack on your Blade Runner with the Husk. So Kasai, less than ideal, I think. Okay, we're moving quite quickly through these. Katsu it's don't do it. It's worse than Ira, and Ira's not great. So here we are. Kavdeen in the meme tier. They don't even have Genus. They don't even have what you need, and sometimes that is Genus. KO. I'm gonna put KO down in the don't do it tier. Maybe there's some spicy version of KO that isn't out there and hasn't been created yet, but right now I've not seen it. Levia, don't do it. We're not here. Listen, I'm not here to ruin your tournament, guys. I'm not here to ruin your tournament. I want you to have a good experience. And so if I don't think something's actually good that like I would consider maybe bringing to a tournament, I'm not going to tell you guys to. Prism, genuinely a potential playable, and Prism is considered a bit of a meme in Blitz, but I'll give you the reasons why. Right now, this boy, I'm going to put him here. I'm going to give you the free spoiler. He's going to be the most popular deck in the tournament. Oldhim will be the most popular deck in the tournament. That's pretty common knowledge, right? We all know that. Prism has a great matchup in there. You don't need that many auras or that many ways to make spectral shields to beat the Oldhims. And once you've got that, you've already got an insanely good matchup that is also the most played deck in the field. And granted, it can only be 33% at max, and it won't be. It will maybe be 25% of the field, because there'll be a lot of teams still not bringing Oldhim. But if you have, you know, a buy against 25% of the field, and then you can start to find, you know, some good matchups into Kano, maybe a decent matchup into Dorinthia or Kasai, then it starts to look potentially playable. I don't know how good the Bravo matchup would be, but, you know, that's probably not going to be one of the more played. And then we get to the next big real problem for why Prism is actually not playable, is because unfortunately Rhinar exists, and Rhinar into Prism is just about the biggest miserable thing you could even imagine. I can't fathom how you would ever win this matchup. Maybe Rhinar doesn't draw any 6s. Yeah, probably not going to happen. So let's talk about Rhinar. Rhinar actually not going to be in the potential playables list. It's, for me, in the Bruh tier. I've heard a lot of talk that this deck's, people consider it one of the top 2 decks in the format. I think that's nonsense. I think the Brute Copium is out of control, and I think someone needs to really say it. This deck's not good. it doesn't have a high enough damage output to actually match up with the real pillars of the format, the real things that are good. It just does smaller numbers because it plays bad brute cards. And that's unfortunate, but that's the reality that we live in. And so if I was to play Rhinar, it would only be because I thought that there was a lot of Prism and a lot of Oldhim. And I think you probably do end up having a fine matchup into Fatigue Oldhim, like a good matchup, a really solid matchup into Fatigue Oldhim. But even into the mid-range Oldhims, like we saw in the Battle Hardened in New Jersey. I walked around those tables because I was there, not playing the event. I was taking the morning off, and I walked through, and there was a lot of Rhinos. There was many. It was the second most represented deck in the field, and yet, where were they? Where were they? You know, we can only wait so long with people saying, "Oh yeah, this hero's pretty good," without it ever doing well in events. And I'm willing to say it's not good. It's Bruttier. Shiana, she's in the don't do it tier. Viserai, listen, if I could, I would, but don't do it. Briar's going into the potential playables tier. I think both Chain and Briar end up kind of looking pretty similar in their matchup tables. Both can be question marks into Oldhim. So it's about hammering out and understanding how to have a good matchup into the different kinds of Oldhim. Weirdly enough, I think Briar struggles more into the sort of mid-range, slightly aggressive versions of Oldhim, and Chain struggles maybe a bit more into the fatigue versions of Oldhim, but it's about whether you can find answers to those. And then I think they'll be good into all the rest of these heroes here. So I think they're certainly up there in terms of playables. So these are all the playables, and we got one hero locked in. My team is playing Oldhim. It's going to go into the Brut tier. It's like you're playing fine cards. You have some powerful cards in your deck. You can do some things. But are you playing one of the most powerful strategies in the format? No, you're not. Let's move on. And here she is, my queen. Not a lot's been said about Data Doll in the format, and I think that's really interesting. Unfortunately, don't do it. She's not good. She's completely unplayable. I hate to admit it. I really wanted to have her up here. I really wanted to put her here. I looked actually into the deck a lot, but 3 intellect's just not a barrier that you can overcome. In a slower format, maybe in like an adult Data Doll, genuinely could be playable because Microprocessor is an insane card, and you can generate a ton of resources. But this deck's a few slices short of a loaf. So unfortunately, don't do it. Don't play 3 intellect heroes. Don't get on a plane to play a 3 intellect hero. That's what we're gonna say. So now let's pick our guys out of here. So I'll tell you the hero that I'm not playing in the team, but my teammate is. My teammate will be playing Chain. I think Chain is actually the strongest of the Rune Blades in Blitz. I think Belittle Minnowism is an exceptional combo, and Husk shines even more in Blitz than it does in CC. You get 6 armor out of a total. You get 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 armor in a format where you have 20 life. You have over 50% of your life as armor. And in a format where you're trying to kill them in turn 2, turn 3 as Chain, you're probably only going to be paying 1 or 2 life for that back in Husk debt. So I think Husk is actually really exceptional. I think you do want to build your deck in a way that you have good game into Oldhim, and finding a strategy in which that is strong and playable is really important. But I think with enough reps you can get that. And then our final deck, currently, for me, is between Kano, Briar, and Kasai. But I'm going to go out on a limb and lock it in and say I will be playing Kasai this weekend. I think Kasai's got such a good matchup into Oldhim. Such a solid matchup into Rhinar, Dash, which I think people will play these decks because they've been lied to. I think a solid matchup into Briar, a really bad matchup into Kano. I don't think many people will play Prism, but it's good into that as well, and it's good into Dorinthia as well, because you just block so well. You get to block so efficiently, and you have so much armor to block with against Dorinthia that you kind of cover her effects. I think you're good into Bravo, Ira. I think you're insanely efficient and like reliably good at beating all of the other niche heroes because your deck's just so consistent. I think Kasai, although people have been told Kasai sucks, right? Like that's the narrative right now, is that Kasai is not a good deck, but I think people are they're just wrong. They're just wrong. They just don't understand how much this format has slowed down and how much fairer this format has gotten. And granted, if you take Kasai, you are accepting a pretty bad matchup in Kano. And that's why if I was to change anything about our team, I'd probably be willing to make this change. You could also potentially make this change or this change. You know, I think any combination of these five would be my top 5 playables. But we will be going with these 3, as I do believe that they are the best 3. I think you probably have a sussy time with Kano if you run this lineup. I think Kasai is really bad into Kano. That is the one matchup I worry about. But I think it's good enough that it's a good enough deck into the rest of the field that you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. You're going to accept that I probably lose to Kano, 75-80% of the time. Their deck just happens to line up really well. My deck isn't aggressive enough, and I don't get to use... I don't have a high enough blue count to deal with Kano's combo. I don't have any spell with 2 armor, and I don't have like an overwhelmingly powerful like early game push with equipment. So you just accept your beats and you move on. If you happen to be a Kano enjoyer, totally fine to change this slot to Kano. These are just the 3 decks that we've chosen. I think it's a really, really good lineup. I think you couldn't go wrong with it. And I'm going to be putting out a video on my Kasai list exactly in the next couple of days. If you do want it, you can just PM me, find me on Discord. The Discord link will be down below. I do have a community Discord. I'll put the link for that down below as well, where I play games pretty much every day. So if you want to hear more, ask me some questions, or just try and play some games. We've got a lot of people in there that play games. And we have a lot of really good players that play in there regularly. So there it is, guys. That's your team. If you want to win the calling, that's the team. Kasai, Chain, Oldham. Alright, I've taken up enough of your time. So let me know in the comments down below what team you'll be playing. And if you think I said anything wrong, if I insulted your favorite hero, tell me why I'm an idiot. Tell me why I'm a fucking moron. Peace.